There are 21 county councils in England and 10 unitary authorities as well, all up for election in May. Will every one of those elections go ahead, Minister?
So more details will follow later on. I'll be making a statement in Parliament this afternoon that will set out the detail of that. But this is an open invitation.
So they won't be then, Minister?
But it's an open invitation for councillors who want to be part of an early tranche of reorganisation and devolution.
Why aren't they all going ahead?
And I would say, even before the white paper has been published,
maybe there's a problem with the line. Why aren't they going ahead, Minister?
Well, at the moment, the assumption is that elections are going ahead. However, it's usual in a process of reorganisation that when a council makes a request for reorganisation, that if there are elections taking place to a council that it essentially won't exist within the term of those elections, then you hold off the elections and you elect to a shadow body, the shadow body basically is a form of the new councils that will follow.
You heard that right. A Labour minister reveals that local elections can be cancelled due to reorganisation. However, everyone knows why they are being cancelled or delayed, if we use the mild word. Since the Labour Party has been moved to third position in the latest polls, with the Reform UK in the second spot and the Conservative Party in the number one spot, Starmer is deeply stressed. That's because the Reform UK would probably win if local elections were held now. Therefore, a dictatorial plan has been made and will be put in motion quite soon. The elections will be pushed to 2027, until the time when the Labour Party clears its reputation or perhaps tarnishes that of Conservative and Reform UK. But how will these local elections be cancelled, and what does it reveal about Starmer becoming a third world dictator? In this video, let's find out. In an unprecedented move for Britain, Keir Starmer's Labour government has announced plans to cancel some of next May's local elections. The decision, framed as part of council reorganisation, has been met with widespread outrage across the political spectrum. Critics are calling it a blatant attempt to avoid accountability, tighten Labour's grip on power, and silence the voices of British voters. At its core, this manoeuvre threatens to set a dangerous precedent, with many warning it could erode the fundamental principles of democracy and electoral integrity. For this, Starmer is being brutally roasted in the Parliament.
Yesterday, a former Labour deputy leader referenced my party as a threat to democracy. Now, I'm sure that was a cute turn of phrase for television, but given the framework you've laid out for elections next year to be gained so easily, isn't the real threat here potentially the...
And in answer, the Labour Party has nothing to say.
I wouldn't characterise the party opposite as a threat to democracy, but I think they might be a threat to sanity. I think we are all tested on a too regular basis by, I would say, fairly ridiculous statements that try to wedge and divide instead of coming together. And there's one thing about devolution, which is regardless of party politics, what we have seen in local areas across Labour, the Democrats and the Conservatives is that when it comes to the people and the place and putting communities first, party politics are put to one side, and I extend that invitation to the Reform.
But why are Starmer and the Labour Party doing this? Well, the announcement of cancelling elections comes during Labour's rapidly declining public support. Polling data shows that Labour's popularity has sunk to 27%, its lowest point since Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage's Reform UK has surged to 21%, gaining 3 points in just a week. This shift points toward growing voter dissatisfaction with traditional political parties and reflects the increasing appeal of nationalist populism.
Russell, so we've got the local elections in May, at which we can confidently predict Labour are going to be humiliated because everyone is sick of Labour. They'll vote Reform, they'll vote even Tory, they won't vote Labour. Everybody hates Labour because everybody hates Keir Starmer and his crap cabinet. So they're going to be humiliated. So guess what way that Keir has come up with to avoid this humiliation, this embarrassment? It's going to cancel a load of the elections and say, oh, well, you know, we're going to redraw the borders of a lot of these council areas, so therefore it wouldn't be worth having these. He's going to cancel the elections so that Labour isn't humiliated in the local polls come May. That's a disgrace. And Nigel Farage is absolutely furious.
Keir Starmer's personal approval ratings have also taken a nosedive. According to polling by More in Common, Starmer's approval now stands at -38. a catastrophic 49-point drop from the positive 11 rating he held following Labour's landslide general election victory. This collapse is the sharpest post-election fall of any British Prime Minister in modern history. By contrast, both Tony Blair and David Cameron maintained positive ratings for years after their respective victories. Shockingly, Starmer's numbers now trail those of former Conservative leader Rishi Sunak, whose approval has slightly improved to -31 since his defeat. And this is making Starmer nervous and liable to making some of the worst decisions.
If he wants to know what Conservatives would do, he should resign and find out. Until then...
I'll decide when there's more.
Mr. Speaker, until then, I'm the one asking the questions. There's a petition out there, 2 million people asking him to go.
Before we continue further, tell us, are you enjoying the video? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel for more exclusive videos on the groundbreaking changes happening in British politics. Let's continue now. While Labour stumbles, Reform UK is capitalising on the political turmoil. The party has not only gained ground in the polls, but also boosted its legitimacy through high-profile defections, including former Tory MP Dame Andrea Jenkins and Conservative Home founder Tim Montgomery. This surge in support has positioned Reform UK as a formidable alternative to the entrenched two-party system. Now, the Reform UK is blasting at Starmer and his decision to cancel the local elections.
Mr Speaker, before the election, this Prime Minister said he would lower energy bills by £300. Since he took office, they've gone up by £149. He said he would protect the winter fuel payment, but now he's in power, he's stripped it off our pensioners. And he said he lined up for many photos with waspy women, saying he'd have their backs, and he's just betrayed them in the most scandalous way possible. This is now the defining characteristic of this one-trick phony Prime Minister who says one thing and does another. In Scotland, the SNP are 16 points ahead in the polls. Does he understand? Does he understand why the people of these islands, especially those of us in Scotland, treat him with such...
Nigel Farage has been vocal in condemning Labour's election postponement, calling it the act of a desperate government. He added, Labour has the audacity to call us a threat to democracy, while they behave like third-world dictators. Cancelling elections in areas where reform is gaining momentum is nothing less than an authoritarian power grab. Reform's deputy leader, Richard Tice, echoed these sentiments, emphasising that we now have three parties polling regularly in the 20s. The two-party dominance is breaking apart, and they know it. However, Labour is continuing with its plan, impacting 21 county councils and 10 unitary authorities, with elections potentially postponed until 2026 or even 2027. The government has justified the delays as necessary for restructuring councils into larger strategic authorities designed to oversee populations of 500,000. However, critics argue this explanation is a flimsy cover for Labour's real goal, which is avoiding electoral embarrassment.
This actually is one of the most serious errors of policy and errors of judgment of all of the errors that Keir Starmer has made, in my opinion, over the last 5 months. And I'm afraid, and I might get castigated for saying this, when you think about what Keir Starmer is doing by way of his approach, it resembles the early 1930s in Germany, on the basis that, first of all, you oppress people. Now, he's oppressing what I would call patriots, people that are worried about Britain and us going to hell in a handcart. That's the so-called far-right protesters that he's oppressing. Then you start censoring people. In Germany, they burnt books. What we're thinking about doing here as a government, apparently, is to censor social media. And then you take away people's democratic right to protest at the ballot box, because you know that otherwise, if you don't take it away, that you're going to lose power. That is clearly defined in what you've just outlined here. Getting rid of local elections on some premise of a devolution white paper being in place. It is to stop Labour councillors losing their seats, for them to then rebel, councils to be lost in terms of control.
Local government minister Jim McMahon's statements have only fueled scepticism. During a Commons debate, McMahon admitted that councils undergoing reorganisation could delay elections, but claimed there would not be a mass cancellation for the sake of it. Critics have called this reasoning disingenuous, pointing out that the timing and scope of these delays seem calculated to protect Labour from political fallout. The areas impacted by these delays are telling. They include Conservative strongholds like Kent and Sussex, as well as regions where Reform UK has gained significant traction. Comparisons to previous administrations further highlight Labour's questionable tactics. When the Conservatives reorganised councils, they explicitly rejected proposals to delay elections, prioritising democratic accountability. Labour's actions, in stark contrast, appear to prioritise self-preservation over respect for voters. And this is bringing a backlash, which is rooted in broader frustrations with Starmer's leadership. His government has been accused of failing to deliver on the promises that propelled it to power, like tackling the cost of living crisis, lowering energy bills, and respecting the Brexit mandate. Instead, voters face skyrocketing energy costs, looming tax hikes, and an economy teetering on the brink of recession.
A desperate attempt to relaunch a failing government. Keir Starmer's ratings are down to -32%. That's the biggest fall following a general election, I think, in modern history. And after all the broken promises, promising they weren't going to put up taxes, and then breaking that promise after the winter fuel debacle, stripping the winter fuel payment from impoverished pensioners. All the while, he was loading up on freebies personally from Lord Alley and handing out massive pay rises to his trade union paymasters. It's no wonder the public are already sick of this government, and he's desperately
Starmer's much-hyped plan for change, unveiled at Pinewood Studios, has done little to reassure voters. Trust in Labour's direction has dropped by 4 points to just 29% following the speech, reflecting widespread scepticism about the party's ability to govern effectively. Furthermore, the irony of Labour's current actions is glaring. A party that frequently champions the defence of democracy now stands accused of subverting it. Cancelling elections, an act not seen since wartime Britain, raises fundamental questions about Labour's commitment to democratic norms. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner defended the reforms as a means of empowering local communities. But critics argue the opposite is true. Communities cannot be empowered if their voting right is taken back. The consolidation of local councils into larger, centralised units risks erasing centuries of local representation and alienating voters. By cancelling or delaying elections, Labour is setting a dangerous precedent that raises unsettling questions. If elections can be postponed for political convenience, what other rights could be next? Former UKIP leader Henry Bolton has warned that this is not merely a slippery slope, but a direct attack on democratic principles. Labour's plans could result in smaller councils being merged or abolished altogether, stripping communities of their voices and concentrating power in Whitehall. Political analyst Jonathan Carr-West said that when elections are cancelled, freedom itself is on the line. The British public must decide whether to stand up for their democratic rights or allow Labour's authoritarian tendencies to take root. As Labour faces growing criticism, Reform UK has positioned itself as the champion of disenfranchised voters. The party's messaging, which highlights Labour's fear of the electorate, resonates with a public increasingly disillusioned with the traditional two-party system. Now, it's to be seen what Starmer does. But one thing is certain: if he cancels the local elections, he will go down as one of the worst prime ministers in Britain's history who prioritised party interests over the public's. What do you think? Will Starmer cancel the local elections? Isn't it true that this is a threat to democracy and the people should hold Starmer accountable if this happens? In the comments section right below, share your thoughts on what more dictatorial plans Starmer and the Labour Party might have. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, please like and share the video and subscribe to get more updates on British politics and how events are changing it. Until the next video, stay tuned.